I can see it in the YouTube.
No, I made it. It takes a minute. The relay is at least 1 minute. I already made it go live. Let us see.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. Hide all names. Yeah, let me see. No, he's a little bit.
Okay, sir. Good morning. So, good morning to all the esteemed members of the Ocean Society of India, ladies and gentlemen. The Ocean Society of India has taken up a noble initiative for conducting the OSI webinar series, and under this event, there would be one talk arranged every month from eminent scientists, engineers, academic professionals working in the broad areas of atmospheric and oceanic sciences, ocean engineering and technology, preferably on a weekend, which is Saturday. So that would be convenient for many of us to attend. This webinar series is targeted mainly for students, researchers, scientists, engineers, and working professionals in the field of atmospheric, oceanic sciences, ocean engineering and technology, with a motive to impart and improve the knowledge benefiting the OSI community. I thereby earnestly request all the members to actively participate and get involved in all the lectures under the OSI webinar series that would be held every month. On the behalf of Ocean Society of India, it is my proud privilege to welcome Professor Dr. George Yeshuveda Victor, Managing Director and the Chief Executive Officer Designate of the Dredging Corporation of India, for this invited talk as a part of the OSI webinar series. Dr. Victor will be delivering a talk on dredging and coastline today, a topic of immense importance, especially in the port and harbor sector. We had a total of 3 talks which were conducted last year as a part of this initiative, and this being the second talk of this year. Professor Dr. George Yeshuveda Victor holds a doctorate degree, is a chartered engineer of UK, chartered physicist from UK, a certified dredge master and mariner, qualified in finance management, port development and management, containerization and logistics management, and fellow in arbitration, licensed international arbitrator, mediator, emergency arbitrator, and a qualified admiralty and contracts lawyer. He is a commissioned officer of All India Dredging Cadre, C-suite executive, and a charismatic leader in marine, port, and dredging sector with unwavering commitment to success and focus on development, preserving the environment. He is also the Managing Director and the Chief Executive Officer Designate of the Dredging Corporation of India. Dr. Victor is a recipient of many awards. Amongst others are the Exemplary Achievement Award, the Maritime Award by the Ministry of Shipping, Government of India, and Exemplary Contribution to the Indian Industry by EADA under the umbrella of WODA. He was awarded the Young Scientist Award for his contribution to research in marine engineering and environment. He serves as a chairman and member of technical committees constituted national and international. He is empaneled with the West Bengal State, the Asian Development Bank, ICA, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, MIAC, EMAC, the Indian Dispute Resolution Center, PDRC, IPA, IOP, and SIA. He has been appointed by the Government of India as a member of the 5-member expert committee on skill development program of Sagarmala, Government of India. Dr. Victor is an accomplished professional with a blend of industrial and legal experience and is an international arbitrator and mediator for commercial contracts. He serves as a chairman and the board members of Bangladesh India Mediators Forum, and he serves as member scientific working group in reservoir dredging and safety of dredging operation in the World Dredging Association and in climate and environment working committee in Institute of Physics, UK. He is an international acclaimed trainer, assessor, and speaker. So with this brief introduction, it is my proud privilege to kindly invite our speaker for today, Dr. Victor, to deliver the talk. Kindly note, the questions and answer sessions will be attended after completing the talk, and the questions can be messaged in the chat box. So please, sir, Dr. Victor.
Thank you very much, sir, for your introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, the learned scientists and the learned faculty from various organizations and institutions. It's my great pleasure to accept the invitation of Professor Prasad, whom I know for quite some time, to deliver a talk on dredging and coastlines, which is important in today's scenario because of several ports that are mushrooming along a sea coast of 7,400 kilometers, and also the developmental projects that are taking place in the inland waterways and the Sagarmala developmental projects, where the shape of the coastline may have to undergo change, which could not be a sea change, but there might be a slight change which will have its own impact on the coastline and also the impact on the environment. I thank the organizers and all the other members of the society for their invitation to me. Thank you very much. I will start with giving you a brief introduction of Dredging Corporation of India that I head as a Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer Designate. I'll be taking full charge and responsibility from 1st of March 2021. Dredging Corporation of India is a pioneer dredging organization or the dredging company in India, which was started way back in 1977. And under the Gazette of India in 1987, the government of India thought it's good to start a cadre which will cater to the requirements of the dredging activities along the Indian coast, and that's how All India Dredging Cadre was formulated. And I am from the 6th batch of All India Dredging Cadre. And we cater to the requirements of all the dredging activities in the major ports, minor ports, fishing harbors, naval ports, and also the inland waterways, and a part of reservoir and dam desiltation activities. Dredging Corporation of India owns the largest fleet of 10 trailer section hopper bridges with sophisticated and the latest gadgets, 3 cutter section bridges, 1 backhoe, and a few other ancillary crafts. And Dredging Corporation of India is one among the top in the world, 7th in the world, with in line to the hopper capacity, and also considered to be one among the top competitors in the world. Although Dredging Corporation of India do not have projects in the European countries or in the Western globe, but still Dredging Corporation of India is considered to be a top competitor in the world. With this, I will go to my talk, which is on dredging and coastline. To start with what a coastline is, many of us might have visited a beach, or many of us might have visited the sandbanks on the river, which forms a very unique features. Yeah. So when we're talking about the coastal regions, people living in the coastal regions, we know that the coast has a very unique and a distinct feature by which one can always find that it forms a beach where it's good for recreation, and also you will find that the longest beach lines are good for the habitants to live in. So beaches are another predominantly a good coastal feature, and if someone has observed a beach over this few years, one can always find that the beach is getting eroded or beach is getting accredited, which we will be discussing in the few slides from now. And it could be due to waves, because the waves deposit siltation that carries, and the wave deposits the material that carries. And it could be a reverse action also. The waves could also erode a part of sand which is on the beach. And the other attribution could be the sea level changes. Because of the sea level changes, there's a sea level changes which could have an adverse effect on the coastline. And because we have 12 major ports and about 200 minor ports in the entire seacoast of 7,400 kilometers in India, dredging is imperative, and dredging is a basic necessity to maintain the channels for safe navigation. And dredging also changes morphology of the coastline, which we will also deal how it changes. And it's very interesting to find different coasts have different characteristics. So this is one point which I wanted to impress upon. Not all the coasts behave in the same manner, or not all the dredging that happens in a port or dredging that happens in a particular place will have the same changes of morphology, but each coast and each port depends on a different characteristics, and that's more important for the engineers and the scientists to understand what sort of changes it undergoes. And a simple example of what coastal erosion is, it could be natural or it could be man-made. Man-made is a structure, and a natural, it could be due to storms, it could be due to extreme waves, it could be due to sea level increase, or it could be due to the low pressure that develops in the sea. And during storm, we always know that we have excessive waves, the amplitude and the height of the wave is more, which carries the siltation, which carries material along with it. And when there is a wave breaker, or when it comes close to the coast, it drops its velocity and the accumulation takes place. So therefore, storm could either be a phenomena for accumulating additional siltation, or at places it could also erode the coastline. Similarly, the extreme waves, probably if you would have seen in some of the places, you might have observed the sea is a little choppy with the wave breaking zones, or the subzones, what we call it. And in the subzones, normally it will be a shallow area where you will have a lot of accumulation taking place. And similarly, the sea level increase, when the sea level increases, a part of your coastline is also being taken away by the increase of the sea level. And the structures, the coastal erosion can also happen because of the man-made structures, which could be construction of coastal protection, because we constructed so many ports and the coast is getting eroded, and to avoid it or to protect our coast, we construct groins, or we construct some revetments, or we construct some sort of a structure so that the coastal line is not eroded off and the coastal line is protected. Similarly, construction of other structures like a groin, or a breakwater, or probably trestle, or some other structures which is mandatory for the ports, or which is mandatory for the fishing harbor, or which is again mandatory for desalination plants, where we have to have some sort of structures. And those structures can possibly have an adverse effect on the coastal erosion, and they can either be an action or an opposite reaction. To just give you a pictorial representation, one is the winds. Wind can again have an adverse effect on the coast. The waves can have an adverse effect on the coast. The cyclones can have an adverse effect on the coast, and the sea level rise. And what happens when the wind, waves, and cyclone or the sea level increases? It carries the sedimentation where the velocity and the hydraulics differ in the narrow channel, which is the shipping channel, and it accumulates this carried sedimentation because of the drop in velocity. And once it gets accumulated, it is important for the coastal authorities, or it's important for the port authorities to clear the sedimentation, and that's where the dredging comes into the picture. So eventually, whenever there is a storm or whenever there is a cyclone, the authorities make sure to measure the accumulated siltation or to measure the accumulated sedimentation and to immediately dredge or use some other cost effective measures to clean or to dredge this material to facilitate safe navigation, which in turn increases the GDP of the country. So what happens when the structures are? We saw there are two types. One is the man-made and the nature. Nature we have seen, and what are the structures? We also know that there are longshore drift and then onshore drift and offshore drift. And take an example, when there's a longshore drift or the littoral drift starting from the south and moving towards the north, if there is no structures or if there is no man-made structure or if there is no obstruction, this littoral drift will be carried from the south to the north along with the waves, along with the wave direction. And wherever there is a drop in velocity or the change of hydraulics of a particular place, there might be some deposition and there might be some erosion somewhere. But generally speaking, when there is no obstruction of any man-made structure which impedes the movement of the littoral drift, the sedimentation are carried uniformly, whether the accumulation or whether the erosion, it happens uniformly. So whenever there is an action, there is an opposite and equivalent reaction. So that's what happens. Since there is no action, so it doesn't have an opposite reaction or an opposite action. So let's say when we have a sort of a structure built by a port or built by some other authorities, that means it impedes the movement of the littoral drift, and therefore on the lee side you will always have a sort of accumulation, and the wind side you will always have an accumulation, and the lee side you will always have a sort of erosion. So if you had visited Chennai or if you had visited Visakhapatnam or if you had visited Goa, you could have seen this phenomena is very predominant. On the southern side, you will have a lot of accumulation, and on the northern side, you will have a lot of erosion. Take for example, if you are in Chennai, the Royapuram side, which was there in 1950s or in 2000s, is totally a different coastline and a different morphology as on date when compared with few years back or a few decades back. And if you are looking at Visakhapatnam, and it's again the same thing. You find towards the fishing harbor, or you find towards Bhimlipatnam, the coastal morphology has changed in the last few years, whereas the accumulation is taking place on the south. So similarly, you can see most of the ports predominantly where they have built some man-made structures by way of breakwater or by way of a groin or by way of some structures, a trestle or a LNG terminal which is slightly into the deeper waters. You will always find there will be a sort of an action and a reaction, and the action is you will find there is an accumulation on the southern side, and you will find erosion on the northern side, and there creates an imbalance. There's where the environmental parameters come into major play, and that's where the environmental aspects come into major play. So when you're talking about dredging and coastlines, it's a combination of subjects where we deal with civil engineering for dredging, mechanical engineering for the vessels, whereas we need to have the assistance of scientists and the academicians from the institution to jointly work with them to understand what is the hydraulics of the area, how it's going to get affected because of dredging, or how it's going to affect it because we have a man-made structure, and how to dredge, how and where to dispose this material, where to dump this material, whether it's offshore or onshore, and all these things comes from the academicians to us, and they tell us this is what is the best practice to be followed. And then it doesn't stop there. When there is an erosion and accumulation, the environmental parameters come into the play. When the environmental parameters come into the play, the environmental scientists come into the picture, and then they devise the best practice methods to say how we have to dredge, and where we have to dump or where we have to dispose, and how we have to construct the man-made structure, because we cannot do away with the man-made structures. We cannot do away with the breakwaters. We cannot do away with certain structures. So it is a combination of experts, or it's a combination of different subject experts in a team which works coherently for and also to see that the minimum impact on the coastlines and the coastlines do not differ much. So that's where the structures come into the picture. And just to give you a pictorial picture of how the littoral drift takes place, or the longshore current takes place, I've taken one picture which is in reality, another picture is just an indication of how it looks like and how the accumulation takes place. So there will be sand particles which will be deposited because the waves break, and there is a breakage in the longshore current where the velocity is dropped. Because the velocity is dropped, there might be deflection, and the deflection will create accumulation, and also it might spill over and overflow into the shipping channel or into the deeper pockets. And on the other side, because there is no velocity, and when the velocity picks up on the other side, it always have a tendency to erode and take some of the materials that is on the other side. So this is what the reaction takes place when we are talking about an action and a reaction. An action is where the dredging is taking place in the coastline, or it could be a man-made structure, or it could be a natural calamity where it could be because of rise in sea level, or a cyclone, or a storm, or heavy waves which carries a lot of material. And you can see at different places how it is eroded, starting from Puri, which is always a target of cyclones, severe cyclones and severe storms, Visakhapatnam, and again last year we had a couple of cyclones, Hudud, Palin. So that's how it is. And Pondicherry is it's always a worst hit. Pondicherry, Karaikal is always a worst hit on the southern Tamil Nadu. On the west coast, you always have Karwar and the Kerala south coast, which is always badly affected. And when you go on to the north on the west coast, a part of Bombay is affected, but it is not as when you compare with Puri, Visakhapatnam, or other places in the southern west coast. It is affected, but not to a great extent. And if you go still north, the predominance of the effect because of the natural calamities decreases, but the phenomena of the calamities because of the man-made structure increases. If we compare the slopes of the east coast and the west coast, it's drastically different. The slopes on the west coast is steeper, whereas the slopes on the east coast is tapering, gradual. So that's one of the reasons where you have a lot of sandbars and a lot of sedimentation and siltation, which is getting accumulated in the channels, and which is getting accumulated elsewhere. And the dredging requirement on the west coast is much higher than the dredging requirement on the east coast. I can give an example, like if you look at Visakhapatnam or Chennai or Tuticorin, or even for that case Krishnapatnam or Karaikal, the dredging requirement is not that exorbitant when you compare with the west coast or when you compare with the northern side of the east coast. It is very minimum, probably about 2 million in a port per annum, or even less than that. Whereas on the northern side of the east coast, starting from Paradeep, Dhamra, and Calcutta and Haldia, the dredging requirement is very high for the simple reason these places are prone for cyclones and storms. And these areas are prone to have heavy waves where lot of sedimentation are being carried by the waves. It's not because they have permanent man-made structures, but it's because of the natural phenomena. When compared with the southern part of the east coast, where you have many man-made structures, but still your dredging requirement is very low because that coastlines are almost stabilized, and that for that reason the carrying capacity or the lateral drift also has a balance between the lee side and the wind side. So that's the reason on the southern part of the east coast is comparatively lesser for dredging, whereas the northern part of the east coast we have more dredging volume because not of the man-made structures, it's because of the natural phenomena. Like natural calamities. And when I said a little earlier, from Bombay to the upwards north, there is no much of natural calamities. So there's no much of vegetation, but unfortunately, in these places, you have many more man-made structures, and because of this man-made structures, the sand bars get formed, and because of these man-made structures, most of the channels have a great phenomenon of sandbars, which is unlikely on the east coast. And also, some of the southern part of the west coast is severely prone for the effect of cyclone. On the east coast, it's one, whereas on the west coast, you have got a severe cyclone, and this severe cyclone brings in a lot of sedimentation starting from Cochin till Goa. Whereas above Goa, you have man-made structures where your sedimentation increases, and because your sedimentation increases, the sandbars form, which is a common phenomena, and this sandbars has to be dredged at regular intervals, and that's the reason the west coast dredging quantum and the requirement is much higher when compared with the east coast of India. So that's a reaction. And what is the man-made structure? And we do revetments for our coastal protection. Then we build seawalls, and seawalls is a common phenomena in down south on the east coast. You will find many seawalls, and also on the southern side of the west coast, you will find many seawalls. Groins, which is a typical example of Rayapuram, I mentioned. The north coast of Tamil Nadu, up in Rayapuram, you will find there are many number of groins, about half a kilometer or 1 kilometer distance between each. And again, similarly, groins can be found in Gopalpur and close to Paradeep, because these are severely prone for cyclone and severely prone for the storm, and that's the reason you have got many groins on in the northern part of the east coast. And then you have got offshore breakwaters, and offshore breakwaters are not very dominant in the Indian scenario or the Indian coast, and groins are very predominant. Offshore breakwaters, the concept is not that used or not that utilized in India, but in the European countries we have offshore breakwaters and submerged reef. And we don't have many submerged reef. We have only submerged reef on the southern side of the east coast of India, where we have got many southern submerged reefs. And because of this submerged reef, there is no activities taking place there, and that's the reason, though the siltation takes place, there is no regular excavation of material, or there is no regular emptying of this material. If you look at below Tuticorin, south coast of Tuticorin, if you look at the Mannar state, there are many submerged reefs, but the dredging activities not take place and the siltation happens there, and that's the reason those coasts are fairly maintained between India and Sri Lanka. And when there is a action, there has to be a reaction, and the reaction is erosion. So when there is excessive erosion, you have to nourish the beach, and that's what exactly the Dredging Corporation of India or any other dredging contractor does. If you don't nourish the beach, it's going to erode your, and it's going to get into the erosion, which will eat away the entire sea coast. Once the entire sea coast is eaten away, there's going to be an imbalance, and this imbalance is going to create several other environmental impacts on the coastline, where your ecosystem is going to have a different change. So this is where we as a dredging contractors, or this is where we as a Dredging Corporation of India, we come in to do beach nourishment. That's not what we do. That's a part of our work. We normally clean the channel, to dredge the channels to maintain it because of the cyclone or other phenomena. But this is one of the activities what Dredging Corporation of India undertakes, is to nourish the beach so that the coastline is maintained, the stability of the coastline is maintained, and there is no excessive erosion on one side, which will result in an imbalance, and which will result into a much larger imbalance in the ecosystem. So this, while talking on the coastlines, I said one of the activities the Dredging Corporation of India is involved is in the beach nourishment, where we do beach nourishment. So let me talk something about dredging. Many of you might know what is dredging, and many of you might have observed, or many of you might have seen the dredging activities. But then I wanted to give you a bit of an explanation, and then collaborate the coastline, the dredging, and the environment. So for that reason, I just wanted to give you a very brief of what dredging is. Dredging started as an art. It was no rocket science those days. It started way back, as old as the civilization started, when people thought that the water is getting intruded in their places. They wanted to have a sort of a elevated place. So that's where they started to dredge. And the first dredge person, or the first dredging contractor, the first dredging technique was using their hands. They use their hands to carry the sand and put it on a place where they get an elevation. And as the time passed, it became a sort of existence, a survival for existence. And the survival for existence is to avoid water coming into the living area, to avoid water coming into the habitat. So they use some sort of a technique to have the material picked up from the seabed, or picked up near coast, and then have an elevation in the living area. And for the first equipment they used was a spoon and a bag. It's something like what we have, a spoon where we have a handle and a sort of a curved surface. They use that to pick up the material, and then they use that, typically a bag, to fill this material and then drag the bag for emptying it on the land. And similarly, when the revolution took place and they got into some other mechanism like shovel, like spade, and whatever they could think of, they got into earth. And after the steam engines came into the place, they developed engines which could drive, which could create vacuum, and which could suck the material and pump it to some certain distance. So that's how the revolution took place. Then the art of dredging was converted into science, and today it is a pure technology. We no longer consider that as an art, or we no longer consider that as a primitive methods. Today we bank on science, technology, and engineering, and we do precise work. And we always have collaboration with so many academicians. We always have collaboration with so many subject experts across the globe, across pan India, where we identify them, for an example, NIOT or NTC PWC in Chennai or NIO. We always work with them very closely to understand how the models they make and how we can use it so that it's cost effective, number one, and it also has a minimum impact on the environment and a minimum impact on the coastline. So having said that, it's now a absolute technology. So we do not use the old techniques of the primitive ages. And although it is a primitive technique, but still we are happy that it's one of the oldest profession of the mankind. And even today, in parts of Europe, particularly in Belgium and Holland, dredging is basically used for survival. Survival in the meaning they create land because they live in a low-lying area. So to avoid water or to avoid certain parts of their land getting engulfed by the water, they always dredge to make sure that they create more land for them to live. So for at some part of the world, dredging is for survival, and at some part of the world, dredging is for shipping or dredging is to create harbors. And some part of the world, like in Middle East, dredging is for creating recreational activities because they have more money so they can spend on recreation activities. So dredging has different phases. It's not only dredging to maintain the coastline, it's not only dredging to create a new harbor or to maintain the new harbor for the safe navigation of the ships. It's also used to dredge and cap the environmental material so that the environment is not polluted. And it is also used for recreational activities. And in some parts of the world, it's also used for survival techniques. So dredging, depending upon the activity, takes its own shape, and depending upon the activity, the equipments are designed, the equipments are used. And as I earlier pointed out, if there is an action, there has to be a reaction, that Newton's law of motion, which says if there is an action, if there is an accumulation on one side, there has to be an erosion on some other side. And that's how the morphology changes. And when dredging takes place, it's predominant that the morphology is going to absolutely change at some point or the other. It may not be observed close to the dredging area, but probably a little further. The dredging area, they can always see there is a collapse in the coastline or the material or sliding more than what it should slide. So these sort of morphological changes normally take place when the dredging activities is taken place. And let me give you a small definition of what dredging is. Dredging is nothing but it's an underwater excavation to create a new channel, a new navigation channel, or to maintain the new navigation channel, the recreational activities, the environmental activities, and the commercial activities, such as the ports, the fishing harbors, the naval dock, and the defense activities, where we need to have a dedicated a port, or we need to have a dedicated facility for our naval vessels to quickly get into the sea in case of emergency and in case of requirement. So dredging is basically underwater excavation which removes virgin soil and if capital dredging is required, or it removes the silted material, or it removes the sedimented material in terms of maintenance dredging. So in both ways, we remove the material which could be either disposed out in sea at a designated area, which is predominantly designed by the academicians or by the researchers. Normally, it's done by NIO or NIOT. They give us the coordinates where that dumping has to be done if it is an out in sea, so that this material do not come back to the coast or do not come back to the dredge navigation channel. Or they design, if the material is suitable for reclamation, then they again design certain parameters where this material has to be pumped on shore and where it should be reclaimed. Or if the material is good for construction purpose, they inform us where this material should be stockpiled. And one of the very important aspect of this is this could be that dredging can happen in one place and the sea disposal or the shore disposal can happen in some other place. So the material has to be transported it can be transported through a hopper by a self-propelled dredger or a self-propelled barge, or it could be transported through a pipeline. And finally, it is disposed. So dredging is nothing but a cycle of underwater excavation, removal of material, storage of material, transportation, and disposal. In the disposal, adopting the best practices. Let me also inform the learned audience. The Ministry of Shipping, under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, in 2021 February, 2 weeks back, they have debated with many academicians, with many subject experts, and they have come to a conclusion that all the bridge materials from all the ports henceforth to be studied for the beneficial use of the material. Because all these years we must have dredged few million cubic meters of sand, and we are dumped out in sea. And the dredging requirement in India is about 150 million cubic meters per annum across from all the major ports and minor ports. 150 million cubic meters, even if we could think of saving at least 10% or 15 million cubic meters, entire construction activities of and infrastructure construction activities. So now they have come out with sort of a white paper where they said all the dredging equipment dredged from all the ports have to be closely monitored. Number one, have to be extensively studied, have to be analyzed for its beneficial uses of material, and if it can be used, then it should be not dumped in sea. It should be pumped ashore or stockpiled for beneficial uses, which could be used for the NHAI, that's the national the National Highways Authority, or it could be used for construction purpose or the infrastructure purpose, or it could be even used for the commercial the countries. So if someone of the researchers are interested, probably they can go to the Ministry of Shipping website to download the dredging guidelines, wherein they have proposed the beneficial uses of the dredge material, which I think, in my personal opinion, a decade to come, it's going to be the subject to be studied, and it's going to be the subject to be documented as such. As of now, we do not have much of the documents in our archives of the material that we dredge, what can be the industrial uses, or what can be the industrial benefit, or what sort of benefit, and what is the cost benefit analysis. So if some of the researchers are really interested, the young researchers, they can always look into the areas where they can broaden their knowledge, and they can also serve the nation with their bright ideas. And the Honorable Minister is open for suggestions and open for ideas, more so particularly in the beneficial uses of material. And also the second avenue or the area of interest of our Honorable Minister is to desalt the dams and reservoirs, which has not been desalted for several decades. And if one can go through the World Bank report, the World Bank report says by 2030, the water table is going to get depleted, and by 2050, there's going to be a scarcity of water, and beyond which there could be possibly war because of fresh water. And in India, we always that during the summer season there is drought, and in one place there's always a flooding, and other place it's always a drought. So the young researchers, I can vouch for you that this is a subject where the government is interested, and the government is encouraging the young researchers to come up with ideas, the solutions, so that our water table is maintained, or our water table is preserved, and we do not fall into the scarcity list of water. Though we have many waterways, one of the reason why this government has promulgated national waterways of 105 rivers, along with the existing of 6 rivers, which is 111 waterways, 11 rivers, where the government is seriously looking at some researchers coming up with some ideas or some suggestion which will be beneficial for the nation, and which will be beneficial for the mankind in India. where we can retrieve the lost waterways, we can retrieve the lost glory of these rivers, thereby that not only the irrigation can flourish, we can also have an inland waterways where the last mile connectivity can be developed, the last mile connectivity can be addressed, and moreover, the water table can be preserved. That's the more important aspect of our our Honorable Prime Minister, to make sure not only commercial activities take place, he is more he has given more emphasis, he has given more thought to the preserving the ecosystem. How do we preserve ecosystem? By claiming claiming the past glory, where we convert that into a commercial activity, and thereby our ecosystem is maintained. When the ecosystem is maintained, everyone know that the water table increases, and when the water table increases, the scarcity of water will reduce. So I would urge the young researchers or the young students, if you are participating in this webinar, please think about it. Your services will be much more required, and your inputs and your suggestions will be certainly valued by the Ministry of Shipping and the Prime Minister's office for the betterment of this country. Dredger is an equipment which is used to dredge. And earlier times, I said it's a primitive age where it all started with hands, then the spoon, then the shovel stayed, and then they adopted some other mechanism which were too primitive. But on invention of the steam engines, or the invention of the engines, the invention of the pump, they slowly graduated based upon the inventions and innovations, added with innovations. And today we are in a better position where we have innovation and we work with the latest technologies. So a dredger is nothing but a tool which facilitates to carry out the activities of excavation, storage, transportation, and disposal. And equipment could be mechanical or hydraulic. It can be a mechanical dredger or it could be a hydraulic dredger. And evolution of equipment, which we already discussed, basically it's of two types. It is mechanical or hydraulic. And mechanical was a primitive equipment, and today we have all hydraulic equipments. Nevertheless, we have not done away with the mechanical equipments like a backhoe or a grab or an orange pit or a bucket ladder dredger. We have not. It's not obsolete even in today's terms. It is more useful to dredge at the corners or at lesser maneuverability areas where the hydraulic dredger would not approach easily, or where their efficiency will not be economical. So in those areas, we always use a mechanical dredger. And what do? We develop the ports, we develop harbors, and then damming of the rivers and dredging of tidal inlets. And tidal inlets in India, we have only two. One is on the east coast, one is on the west coast. On the east coast, the only place is Haldia and Calcutta. On the west coast, we have two, rather three. One is Cochin. Goa is Goa. We don't have a tidal inlet for the port, and we have Azira, and the third thing is Kandla. So these are the tidal inlets where you have to always keep a close watch of how your channel is going to behave, because your channel alignment might change when you're depending upon your tidal prism, and for that reason, dredging and tidal inlets are a bit cumbersome and a bit challenging when dredging in a conventional, artificial, or semi-artificial or a natural ports. And the actions are, because we dredge, there is a change in the morphology, there could be a change in the coastline, and there could be changes elsewhere, not within the port limits. And for that reason, the reaction is you have to control this changes and maintain and balance. And for that, you do some sort of a man-made constructions, man-made structures of coastal protections to maintain your coast or to maintain your river banks in case it's inland waterways, by building groins or revetments, or or to control erosion, you also build some structures, especially for breaking of waves and to prevent siltation in case of it's an tidal inlet. And the dredging activities, as I earlier said, we do not do only one type of dredging. We have a gamut of dredging, which starts with creation of a navigation channel, which we call it as a brown green port, and maintenance of the navigation channel is a brown port. Then we have beach nourishment to make the balance on both the sides. Reclamation works, the creation of new land. This concept is not very new, it's very old, and we have created more lands. And right now in Bombay, we are creating an additional land for about 3 square kilometers, 1.5 to 2 square kilometers, and they are extending by another 800 meters, 800 meters dia. So reclamation works can be for reclaiming your low-lying land or creating a new land for constructional purpose or creating a new land for some other purposes. And sand mining, again, sand mining is not new in India, but now it's one of the close interested topics for the Ministry of Shipping, where they say you have to dredge and even sand mining could be one of the options where there is a scarcity of resources, majorly sand. And environmental dredging per se in India, we do not carry a lot of environmental dredging, but for a limited clients such as Navy, either in Bombay or Navy in Visakhapatnam, but we do not cap this material. We only dredge the contaminated material, peats or other organic materials, and then we dispose out at sea and in a far off area where it cannot come back to the navigation channel or it cannot come back to the beach. So nothing much of environmental dredging we are doing in India, but only limited. And creation of recreational facilities. Very off late we have started into this particular activities, where in Mumbai we have started first, and Prime Minister inaugurated Roro Jetty in Goa, Dahej. So there is some sort of a recreational facilities being created by dredging and by reclamation works, but it's not very predominant. It's only a minor part of the dredging activities. I will quickly run through the different types of equipment, starting primitive age. I will leave aside the primitive age, and these are the mechanical dredgers. What I said, it's a bucket dredger, the grab dredger, the dipper, and the backward dredgers. This is a typical bucket chain dredger, which is obsolete because nobody is using it because of the cost benefit because of the cost benefit variance. It's very slow, and the cost per cubic meter is little higher than the latest dredges. And so that for that reason nobody uses it, but it's one of the best tool. But two such equipments in the world. One is owned by Road Nelson, and the other one is owned by a private party in Middle East. And this is how it looks like, the bucket ladder dredger, which has a chain of buckets of about 3 cubic meters, and the minimum is about 0.8 cubic meters. And this chain runs throughout, and these buckets are made up of heavy material, so that it can dig up dig up either clay, or it can dig up weathered rocks. This is a clamshell or a grab dredger, a backhoe, and again a backhoe, a front shovel and a back shovel. We got two different sort of backhoes. This is a plain section dredger. This is again a cutter section dredger, but it's a very plain section dredger, well suited for sill or a very soft material. And this hydraulic dredgers, which are basically the cutter section dredger, the trailer section dredger, and the plain section dredger, which forms the same family. The cutter section dredger with a cutter which can dredge sand, which can dredge clay, or which can also dredge up to certain N value of the rock, which could be about 50 to 60, depending upon the cutter power, what is installed. And the barge unloading dredger, which is not uncommon phenomena. We use a barge unloading dredger for a cutter. This is what the cutters is. The difference between the clay cutter and the rock cutter. Rock cutter, you can see it's much pointed, whereas the clay cutter, you can see the points are much flatter, because the clay cutter is used so that you don't get clay balls which cuts like a sort of a cake, whereas the rock cutter, we need to have a point force on this rock to break this rock and to dredge it. So that's the difference between that. It's a trailer section hopper, where you have a minimum, the smallest trailer is about 450 cubic meters, and the biggest trailer today we have is 45,000 cubic meters. So one can imagine the range of cutter section, trailer section dredges we have. And in Dredging Corporation of India, the lowest we have is 4,500, and the largest we have is 7,500. This is what I was talking about. This picture, I took it from a book, Herbage, but today we have 300, 450 is the smallest, and 45,000 is the biggest. So that's a variation of hoppers we are talking about. And these are different types of beach nourishment. You nourish the beach using a pipeline, or you can nourish a beach using a rainbowing system. If the gradient is much deeper, as in the west coast, you can always use a rainbowing system. But if you are doing beach nourishment on the east coast, because of the gradient, you cannot go close to the coast. So you have to anchor your vessel a little farther where water depth is there, and then you can pump it through pipeline. And this is again a split hopper dredger. Split hopper dredger are not many in the world now. It's getting obsolete because of its disadvantages of having the hopper split into two. But there are few dredgers still available. This is a dragget, a typical dragget, what we can think of. This is how a conventional dragget takes it. This is called this dragget can dredge stiffly even without any problem. And this is what this is how typically a channel design looks like. You have, when you design a channel, whether it's one-way channel or two-way channel, you should consider the density of the water, whether it's a dock water or a sea water, or a little above fresh water, because your draft of the vessel depends on the density of the water. So once you know that, you can always design your channel, and certain things you have to take into consideration. That's your degree salinity, because the draft in seawater will not be the draft when it comes to the shore, or when it comes to the port, where it's a dock water, or more so it is a fresh water. So you have to consider roll and pitch, you have to consider squatting, you have to consider yawing, the settlement, and underkill clearance when the vessel comes into the port. This is how a typical channel is designed, and this is how the commercial designers. I showed this is the channel. This is channel design where you have stable slopes with this is the bottom of your channel. And when it comes to the commercial design, you cannot have exactly how you design. So there will be some ups and downs, because you do dredging underwater and you excavate material underwater, and you cannot be 100% sure that you can have a design excavated how it's excavated on land. So for that reason, if you look at the pink line, that is how it looks like after dredging. So this will be your channel, that's your design, and this will be your payable depth, below which it will not be paid. So you have to give the final depth between your design level and your over depth, which is paid. So if you come below this, the client is not going to pay. So that means this is a design channel wherein your finished level is this. So that means this channel is clear of any pinnacles or high spots, and this is safe for navigation. And you cannot have this, because this is how the siltation has taken place, light blue color, and the green color is the plan and specifications at the time of bidding. So this is a typical commercial design. I just wanted to show you. And having spoke about dredging and coastline, the third aspect, which is more important, is the environmental aspect. Without environment, dredging or the coastline balance cannot be met. So for that reason, we have to also closely work with the environmental researchers to understand what the environmental law talks about, or what the environment clearance talks about, and how do we apply these activities so that the balance of the ecosystem is conserved. So we need to have a mandatory environment clearance for all the dredging projects, particularly for the dredging permits and disposal permits, which normally the research institutions like NIO, NIOT, or NTP, NPCP, WC, or one of these IITs, or the reputed universities, they always help the contractors to prepare the mandate of dredging permits and the disposal permits. And if it's a drilling and blasting in case of rock, then you need to have a drilling and blasting permission. Then the most important thing is the protection of mangroves. If there is a mangrove, then there will not be an environmental clearance at all. So mangroves has to be protected. Then protection of freshwater bodies in case if dredging activities are going to be a part where you're going to destroy or it's going to have an impact on the freshwater bodies, then separate clearances shall be met. And as I already discussed, beneficial use of the dredge material is going to be the next decade topic among the researchers to be researched, documented, and to set the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, and to give a wide interest to the contractors of how they should dredge and what is the cost benefit analysis and how successfully they can do this. And this is the environmental pattern, how for a typical dredging project, the project to be environmentally acceptable. Then you go in for the initial evaluation, and if the evaluation is acceptable by the regulatory, then the project you can go ahead with the project. It is acceptable. If it is not, then you have to conduct further investigations as mandated or as directed by the regulatory bodies, and therefore the project can be accepted. And when you're talking about the Indian environmental clearance, we've got 4 arms, which is the Ministry of Environmental and Forest, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Animal Husbandry and Dairy, Ministry of Shipping, and Ministry of Defense. And we need to get clearances from all those 4 ministries in order to have an environment clearance in hand. And this, I think everyone of us are aware, but just to show you, just to indicate you how important is to get the clearances, environmental clearance, and also how important is it to coordinate with different departments to get the environment clearances. And before I finish, the environment clearances, if you are looking at what is the local, state, and the central, and all the 3 has to deal with the environment clearances. If you look at a typical project, it starts with the panchayat level, then the state environmental team, and then the central environmental team, which finally clears and gives the environmental permit. So that's what it is shown in this diagram, where it starts with the panchayat, then the state, and then it goes to center, and all the acts has been stipulated there or tabulated there. And if any one of you need a copy of this, you're free to write to me or to Professor Bhaskaran or to Professor Swami. You can get a copy of this presentation. And I think as an environmental researcher, and as an oceanographer, or as a oceanographic engineer, or as a civil engineer who works very closely with the environment, this will be one table which gives you all the acts which is to be which is to be incorporated if you're going for a environmental clearances. before I complete, I just wanted to give you a small brief. We saw Coastline, we integrated it with dredging. Then we saw what is an action and what is a reaction, and then how environment we have to uh, uh, balance it, and what are the inputs is required for the environmental clearances, and who clears environmental clearances, and what are the acts that are required for the environmental clearances. Having said that, I just wanted to give you a small brief of what Sagarmala is. Many of us know what Sagarmala is, but to give you an additional information, Sagarmala is an integration of inland waterways, the coastal shipping, and the ports. And that's for connectivity of the last mile connectivity, so that we have a seamless transportation, or we have seamless delivery of our cargo, even from the hinterland to the ports, where the Sagarmala is envisaged that we have inland waterways where the hinterland cargo is transported through inland waterways, and then it gets into the coastal shipping, where we will have intermodal intermodal jetties, intermodal ports. Then we will have ICDs, where this all this cargo will be stored, and then we will have hub ports. We will have hub ports where all this cargo will be connected, and if there is some cargo which is getting imported, the same thing, it comes to hub port, then it comes to the coastal shipping, and then it will be in the ICDs, which will be taken over by the inland waterways to the last mile connectivity. And that's what the Sagarmala is. And I think that's one of the very good initiative by our late Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And now I think the present government, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister and leadership of Honorable Shipping Minister, has put in all efforts to make sure that Sagarmala is a reality. And once it becomes a reality, I think we will have a seamless cargo movement from hinterland to the hub ports, which can be exported, and similarly the import of cargo to India through the hub ports or through the ports will be connected to the coastal shipping and will be connected to the inland waterways. Thereby, we preserve our water table, we increase our water table, we also reduce our pollution, and we will be a part of the campaigner for climate change. Because when we do this, the pollution levels will fall down. We will preserve our natural resources. We will preserve the natural resources for generations to come and to hand over to the generations. And our GDP will increase, and we will be the first. We will be the first among the campaigners for Climate India. And I do want to close it with invention and innovation, which I was talking about. Invention leads to innovation, and innovation leads to efficiency. Thank you very much. And if there is any questions, I'll be pleased to take it.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was a very wonderful and very inspiring and motivated talk. So there are very few questions. Actually, I will just read out one by one. This was a question by Atul Sharma from the Gujarat Maritime Board. The question what he mentions is, kindly explain the amount of littoral drift in Gujarat coast, particularly Porbandar and Oka, as compared to the east coast.
The question, I can understand the question, but I have to honestly admit I do not have the data readily available with me. Okay. But I will pass on the data to Professor Bhaskar, who in turn will pass it on to you.
Okay, sir.
I'm sorry, I don't have the data readily available in front of me to give you the numbers.
Okay, sir. So the next question is from Dr. CVK Prasad Rao. The question is there any central coordination agency to guide all the dredging operations in an integrated manner so that we can derive the maximum benefit for the coastline?
This is a wonderful suggestion, I would say, rather than a question. As of now, we do not have a coordinated, integrated, dedicated, I would rather put it as a dedicated center. But the Honorable Minister for Shipping, the Ports and Waterways last week has come out categorically to say that there has to be a knowledge center, and this knowledge center should be a sector which can deal with the dredging activities, which can deal with the coastlines, which can deal with the environmental parameters of the coastline. And as rightly Dr. Rao said, this will be the nodal agency from where the knowledge will be shared. So I think
Yes.
that is close to the heart of our minister, and I'm sure that's going to work out in the days to come. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And this is again a question by Dr. CVK Prasad Rao. Is it not time for the India to think of something like a beach management board for all activities affecting our coast?
That's a good suggestion. I will make a note of it, and I will pass it on to the ministry to certainly consider this very positively. Thank you for your suggestion.
Yeah. So the next question is from Dr. C. Ravichandran from NIO, Cochin. He mentioned an excellent talk. A new concept called nautical depth is being adopted in many ports abroad. Whether in India, DCI advocates for that.
In fact, since I have very recently joined and I'll be taking over charge only on the 1st March, it is my desire, and in the past, I've been advocating on the nautical depth, and unfortunately, nautical depth we can adopt only this in Cochin, and also to some extent in Kantla. But it depends. We need to have more studies. We need to have more data, and we need to have the density cloud. We need to have the data on the density cloud. We need to data on the density of the material. We need to have data on the plume. We need to data on the salinity. So all these data are not readily available as of date. Once this is available, I think DCI will certainly strongly advocate this, and I would request the gentleman from NIO Cochin to please help us in collating this data so that we both can jointly represent to Cochin Port and advocate them on the nautical depth, which will be a big expenditure, saving on their expenditure.
Yeah. Okay, sir. So the next, thank you, sir. The next question is from myself actually. It is very good actually. You mentioned about the different types of dredging techniques. How effective is this rainbow technique in an environment with a low tidal environment? Because the rainbow is basically disposing the sediments into the open sea. And correct. Suppose we have a low tidal environment, how effective is it actually? Especially in the southern part of India. Yeah.
Yeah, the southern part of India, it all depends on two things: whether when we do the rainbowing, whether it's suitable material, what is the grains of the material, and and basically we do the rainbowing. It's only to get it's only to nourish the beach. So even if some part of the material is getting washed away, it is for good.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I do see it is effective unless and until there is some morphological changes taking place somewhere, which has to be observed.
Okay, sir. So the next question is, how do we address the contaminant issues in the dredged material for construction activities?
We do only in few ports, majorly in the naval ports, we have this contaminant materials. Otherwise, almost all the major ports and minor ports, we do not come across any contaminant material. And if there is a contaminant material, as a contractor, we advocate the clients that this is not a suitable material, so we do not reclaim the material.
Okay, sir.
As on date, we do not reclaim the material because this material have to be handled with care, and then it has to be capped, and certain number of years has to be left for it to degrade, which we are not at that advanced stage when we compare with our counterparts in Europe. So as of now, we do not advocate them. We do only see dumping.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. And this is a third question also from myself. This in the pipeline transport of the dredged material, how do we account for the bulking factor? Normally, the normal practice is around 20% of solid and 80% of seawater is basically injected to the suction pipeline. So how do we really address when we have sediments which are very fine like clay and silt, which are actually transported through pipeline?
That's always a debatable subject, because as a dredging person, we say it is 30-70, and also we say there is some sort of we have a bed saltation, then the saltation, then the water, and then the air column. But then it's a relevant question of how do we address the bulking factors. All the dredge material what we dredge and pump is measured at the reclamation area in dikes. So we get paid with with the material that is stored in the dike. So there will be some backwash management, or there will be some fines which will not be accounted for, and that a dredging contractor has to absorb himself. And the most important thing when the pipeline transportation and reclamation in the dikes is to make sure that the fines are segregated, and fines are not a part of the reclamation, because it might cause some sort of a eddy currents, and then it will not be suitable for construction purpose.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And there are, I think, there are only last couple of questions are there. One is from Professor Sajeev from QSAT, Cochin. So the question is, in order to keep an environmental friendly and economic dredging activity, what are the procedures that we follow in India?
Now, environmental friendly and economic viability, we follow stringent rules, whatever is stipulated in the environment clearance that's given by the Ministry of MOEF to the Ministry of Shipping. We also take samples to check the turbidity and to check other parameters as stipulated by the environmental in the environment clearances. And having said this, we do everything, and again a contractor has to have some sort of a profit. So it is like you have to balance both. You have to balance the environmental parameters, against at the same time you have to balance the commercial businesses. So we normally follow what is given in the environmental clearances, what is stipulated in environmental clearances strictly.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And this is the last question. This is by Shivani Sahu. The question is how to locate the dumping ground location.
The dumping ground location, what I said is there are two parameters what we basically look at. One is the plume formation. When the dredger dumps the material there, the plume gets formed, and a study has to be made whether this plume is contained within the dredging coordinates which you have designed, or whether it's overflowing from the dredging coordinates. Then accordingly you have to have a relook at the dredging coordinates. And the second important parameter is the dispersion of this plume, how soon it disperses out of the boundaries of the dredging, the boundaries of the dumping coordinates. If it's dispersing very fast, you have to do some sort of tracer studies to see where it's traveling, or where it's getting carried away, whether it's getting carried away into the sea, or whether it's getting carried away into the shore or into the dredge channel again. So these are the major two parameters what I feel the researchers look at. But as a dredging person, we do not look into where the material is carried off. We only look at that we do not have plumes getting formed because of the safety of the vessel.
Okay, sir. So thank you very much, sir. I think all the questions have been covered actually, and I think we are coming to the concluding session of the talk. So Honorable President of the Ocean Society of India, Dr. M. Ravichandran, the General Secretary, Dr. Basant Kumar Jana, the GC members, respected Professor Dr. Victor, our most valued OSI members, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ocean Society of India, myself, Professor Bhaskaran, it is my proud privilege to propose the vote of thanks for today's webinar talk. I would like to thank our invited speaker, Dr. Victor, for enlightening us with knowledge on dredging and coastline. The talk was excellent with deep insights into the topic with very interesting facts. It's a very inspiring talk, motivated talk covering importance of dredging and technology. Very clearly, it has highlighted on the dredging requirements for the east and west coast of India. And today, it's a very important topic, at least in context to the climate change scenario, especially from 2001. We find that the Arabian Sea on the western side is actually quite active in tropical cyclogenesis and tropical cyclone activity. And this is going to have a significant impact on the dredging requirements for the western part of India. I once again thank Dr. Victor for taking out the time from his busy schedule and enlightening us with the knowledge. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to thank the Ocean Society of India for organizing this webinar session. I thank all the participants for their active involvement in today's talk. So with these warm words and kind message, we move to the end of today's seminar. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It was very nice. It was very nice talk.